I don't know, for some they may be long awaited, but they're certainly interesting. What are they? Well, hold on, I'll tell you. They are the numbers in the Providence mayor's race, which has really, in a lot of ways, become a litmus test on Buddy Cianci, which I think is a problem for Jorge Elorza, because most people ask me, hey, Dan, do you think Buddy can win the mayor's race? Who is that other guy? And I think that's problematic. Good evening. Dan York, my state of mind. Welcome to it. At your peril. Dan McGowan, who's wearing the same shirt that I am wearing tonight. Big pre-production mess we have here, although he's got a nice yellow tie. Will be my guest. Same first name, same color shirt. We did not coordinate. He is from WPRI.com, of course, and is a standout journalist who looks at the city of Providence kind of, I wouldn't say exclusively, but certainly as a specialty. He'll have his thoughts on this mayor's race and also the teacher contract thing, which is part of our rundown this evening. And so we've got much to do and so little time to do it in the half hour that we have. It's a pleasure to have you aboard. To the rundown we go. Yeah, a very interesting time we live in right now that the president more or less unilaterally can do that. This is just unbelievable. This was a 3-hour conversation on Dan York, noon to 3 on WPRO today, and I'm still scratching my head. This is interesting. The variables in this contract have caused a little bit of a flutter. We'll talk about that with Dan, and also I'll have a few thoughts on it coming up momentarily here. And it certainly is. It kind of crept up on us, this pre-drought situation that we have. All right, let's dig in. First item, again, would be that the president has stepped up. Excuse me there. Headline. The Washington Post is nice enough to show you a picture because so many Americans have no idea where the heck Syria is. And the Islamic State is a very interesting concept, don't you think? ISIS, ISIL. Now we're referring to them as the Islamic State. It's not going to be too very long before this becomes a politically correct problem or incorrect problem. Having said that, here's the latest from the president et al.
I've spoken to leaders in Congress, and I'm pleased that there is bipartisan support for the actions that we're taking. America is always stronger when we stand united, and that unity sends a powerful message to the world that we will do what's necessary to defend our country. Over the next several days, I will have the opportunity to meet with Prime Minister Abadi of Iraq and with friends and allies at the United Nations to continue to building support for the coalition that is confronting this serious threat to our peace and security. The overall effort will take time. There will be challenges ahead, but we're going to do what's necessary to take the fight to this terrorist group for the security of the country and the region and for the entire world. The strength of this coalition makes it clear to the world that this is not America's fight alone. Above all, the people and governments of the Middle East are rejecting ISIL and standing up for the peace and security that the people of the region and the world deserve.
You know what's kind of interesting about this? The president got bipartisan support, he says. Did you see a vote? I didn't see a vote. One of the interesting things about the modern war era here is that the president acts and he makes a meeting with a couple of folks from the Senate and a couple of folks from the House and then declares that he's got bipartisan support. There's bipartisan opposition to this act as well. Now, I'm not trying to play the dove here. I think that we should be on this like, you know what, on a you know what. But it is a weird time. And it's an easier time to be a member of Congress, don't you think? Either in the House or in the Senate, because the president acts and you kind of say, yeah, I'm a spectator. Used to be that we elected federal officials to actually have a weigh-in on this. The first, or I would say the last real formal vote on go to war is decades ago. I think the actual last formal one was World War II. But there's been congressional conversation and discussion and votes of certain forms and kinds, since then. This one has nothing, other than if you believe that, creating a little bit of weaponry strategy for this anti-Syrian opposition army is a real vote. That happened earlier this week, but nothing happened on this. So, and I don't know, frankly, to be honest with you, with the kind of wars that we're dealing with now, and this is a war, if we'll ever have congressional approval again. Because it ain't the classic good guys and bad guys in time to prepare. Just a thought. Next item. Yeah, this is what? Really? So here's the headline: 4 debates, good enough. I saw this and I thought, wait a second, there's something wrong with this picture. Where's the WPRO radio debate in all of this? Traditionally, the radio station has been a very integral part of the political scene and always a governor's debate. Well, Gina Raimondo there is honoring the boycott, this pseudo organization for our daughters, which has a problem with John DePietro, a host on WPRO, has convinced all these lemmings on the Democratic side not to participate in any discussion. And it's been months now that a whole list of Democrats, including Gina Raimondo, have been non-participatory. Well, I got that part. But Alan Fung reportedly made a deal with Gina Raimondo, according to our radio management, that there would be no radio debates this year. I just thought the Journal maybe had messed up. But it turns out Alan's messed up. See, Alan Fung made a deal with Gina Raimondo. What did he get in return? A lot of harassment from the WPRO bully pulpit. See, he did a Republican gubernatorial debate with Ken Block. But enter Bob Healy into the race now. And so perhaps Alan just doesn't feel comfortable going one-on-one with Bob Healy if Gina doesn't show up to an invited debate. It's been a very strange 2014 election season, and it's gotten stranger still. But Alan Fung is showing me that his junior varsity consultants and he, once again, don't understand the obligations to speak to the people, the benefit in being on the air, the challenge of going against whoever wants to go against you, and the appearance of deal making, which is never in your best interest. Alan Fung shows me once again why he is a JV player, and he can come to the television show where I can tell him one-on-one. Next item. Yeah, what's up with this? It looked like it was a pretty good deal. The headline, WPRI, and of course Dan McGowan, my guest, can talk more about this because he's studied this more in depth, but the teachers have either a political problem with the current administration, that all, everything gets all tangled up when you have governor's races and mayors and all that kind of thing. But I do understand if the teachers are a little tentative about a flexible option in the third year where it's 2.5% raise or kind of a, incentive, merit, reward, whatever the heck you want to call it type of program. Look, big organizations need finite rules in a contract. There are too many pieces of paper in these contracts anyway. I would think that they can do some work on this, even though the mayor is saying we're done negotiating. There's a difference between tightening it up and negotiating. We'll talk to Dan about it coming up. He'll have more insight. And finally, man, are you getting thirsty? The rivers are. I noticed this the other day. I cross over the Blackstone River a couple of times a day in my travels, and my wife and I were driving by it Sunday afternoon, and she noticed, holy cow, you can walk across the river. Most times the river is like way up here over the little bypass, and right now it's, so for that I will just turn off the sprinklers at least one day during the week, and you may want to do that too because it seems like we're pretty close to getting that kind of warning anyway. Watch your environment, Mother Nature. You never know what she's going to bring. The irony is, who doesn't like 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 sunny days in a row? When we come back, Dan McGowan and the polling data on the mayor's race. Stay tuned. It's almost too much to bear to wait. Stay with us. Killer show. Oh, we're back. Oh, did you catch me on that? We're just chatting here, just chatting. Here are the numbers, drum roll. Of course, there's always numbers behind the numbers, and the numbers behind the numbers are actually more important than the numbers sometimes. But in the Providence mayor's race, Buddy Cianci, according to the latest WPRI Providence Journal poll, leads Jorge Elorza by 6 points with Dan Harrop, a 6% Republican draw here. 21% are undecided. Dan McGowan follows Providence politics pretty closely. Welcome again, kiddo. Nice to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Nice shirt.
You as well. We think alike.
Oh, feel like a couple of girls. But anyway, makes sense. There's some people in the Cianci camp who are trying to put into my head that we've got, 60% numbers and all that kind of stuff for him. Well, this particular polling data reflects that that is not the case. Joe Fleming and Associates, correct?
Yep.
All that. What is the structure of this poll in terms of how many folks and who are reached?
So we're talking about 503 voters, likely general election voters. We screened out any of those possibilities that there, someone from Johnston jumps in or something like that. We screened those people out. Cell phones were included, and it was English and Spanish. So we like to believe that we've covered our bases in terms of what we need to for this poll. We're very confident that these are the numbers as they stand today.
These numbers are somewhat reflective of the internal numbers that Mike Solomon told us about in the primary season, saying that he had a better chance to beat Buddy Cianci because he reflected on a 1-point differential versus what he said was a 7 or 8 point differential with Elorza.
31, I think he had.
These numbers more or less reflect that that is the case, right?
Yeah, and it suggests that not much has changed since the Democratic primary. The key, of course, though, you look at the 21% of undecided voters, and you have to assume that many of them will break for Elorza, and now the big question is, can Buddy hit his magic number, which is probably somewhere around 45, 46% of the vote.
Why do you think the 21% will largely break for Elorza?
Well, I think you look at Elorza has about 37% of voters who don't know who he is yet, haven't made up their opinion about it. That gives him a lot of room to grow, whereas very few people haven't made up their opinion about Buddy Cianci.
Right, well, maybe you'll understand this a little bit better if we show you some other numbers. So the numbers behind the numbers. Let's talk about, Laura, if we can put up degree of support, if that makes any sense. There you go. So this means of the folks who said, here's my candidate, are you definitely for? The quotient is very high, equal for Elorza and Cianci at 74 and 72%. Not so much for Harrop, which means that he could actually lose some of the 6% voters that he has there. We'll see. That makes sense because Harrop has been tentative about being in this race anyway.
Absolutely, yeah. Right? I mean, I think it's no surprise that Harrop is way down there, and I think what it shows you is that you're not going to see a lot of Jorge Elorza supporters jump over to Buddy Cianci, and you're not going to see a lot of Buddy Cianci supporters somehow decide, I can't vote for this guy, I'm going to end up in the Jorge camp.
But here's another one of those underneath the numbers that I think is kind of important. Here's the favorability rating for Buddy Cianci. See if we can put that up. That's, Buddy ought to be happy about that given all the heck and hell that he's been through and the city's been through. 53, 37, and only 10% gone, I don't know. But here's the number that I think is really instrumental in maybe Dan's thinking about the undecideds. Can we look at the favorability rating for Jorge Elorza? And that comes out to 37%, as Dan was saying, are not quite sure. Unfavorable ratings are very low, right. Which is good for him, which means in polling world and politic world and campaign world, he's got fertile ground to till, correct?
Absolutely. His ceiling is significantly higher than Buddy Cianci's. The question is, can he get there, right? We know he didn't raise very much money during the primary. He struggled fundraising. We assume that he will do better now that he's got the congressional delegation behind him, the institutional Democratic support behind him, but he still has to show that, right? You also have to, that big undecided number about him, you figure it will grow as more endorsements come out, and as we know, this third-party group is going to come out and probably smear Buddy's name a little bit. So you have to assume that Buddy's probably rock solid at where he is. His question is, can I grow that extra 6, 7, 8% that I need to get over the top? Jorge probably will look at this poll and feel a lot more confident that he can grow much larger.
All right. So when we come back, we'll talk some campaign strategies because these numbers only buoy what I have been saying all along, and that is if Jorge Elorza makes this race about Buddy Cianci, I think he loses. If he makes it about ideas, I think he wins. We'll be right back. Dan McGowan is my guest, and if you just tuned in, no, we didn't coordinate. It just happens that way. You have to read Dan daily at WPRI.com. Really, really, really top-notch journalist, and watches the Providence stuff very closely. We'll talk about the teachers' contract situation in a second. What I said prior to the break, I really truly believe. I think, and I talked to Jorge Alorza directly about it last week. I think that he runs a very high risk of losing this race if he can't shake the way people view it, which is, can Buddy win? Is it about Buddy? And he'll say, well, I was in an hour event, and 45 minutes of it, we talked about my vision, and all you guys want to cover is what I. Well, then stop saying what you're saying.
Right.
About, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
What's your thought on it?
Well, I mean, you're exactly right. Buddy Cianci is essentially the incumbent in this race, right?
Right.
It's been that way in the primary. Who was making the case? Both candidates, Michael Solomon and Jorge Alorza, were making the case that they should be voted for simply because they're the best candidate to beat Buddy Cianci. So I agree with you. These guys made it about Buddy for a long time. The problem is, Jorge's right. The coverage now is, you see every time Buddy holds a press conference, everyone shows up. That wasn't happening all summer for Jorge Alorza, and now Jorge needs to find a way to sort of get more attention back to him, and I think you're right. It should be based on policy as opposed to just, here's how bad of a guy Buddy Cianci is.
Yeah, well, Cianci seems to be coming up with a strategy to run a press conference a week on an issue. Whether he's done his homework on the issue or not, he's going to throw the issue out. Broad Street, urban development was this week's theme. I think that's smart on his part. It'll be Port of Providence next week. It'll be
crime.
It'll be Providence Police Department the next. And did you get a firefighter endorsement?
He did today. He got the endorsement from the firefighters, and by the time this show airs, the police union will have also either announced that they're going to endorse a candidate or that they're staying out of the race.
Okay, interesting, because the police were giving Tavares a hard time.
Police were going to, yeah.
Will the voters be suspect of a firefighter endorsement, or will that move them?
I think initially, people are going to look at it and say, oh, is this result, does this say, because you gave them 5% and 6% COLAs, things like that. But, the strength of the firefighters isn't necessarily that a lot of these guys vote in Providence. It's that they can spend some money, they can send some mailers, they can, certainly influence people that way. And I think anytime you get a major union endorsement and the firefighters are one of the four, it's a big endorsement.
The trump card in this, the wild card, I should say, probably, is the anybody but Cianci crowd, right, on the east side, who may be very motivated by this 21% undecided and only a 6-point gap. And Lauren Adrian, who's in Murphy York, and that crowd that, have a stated goal, I guess, of raising $500,000 to $1 million just to, not to just put gum on Buddy Cianci's shoes, but to literally obliterate any thought of him being a viable human being to actually walk into City Hall, probably will get going pretty quickly, right?
Yeah,
and they
so.
may not hold anything back.
Well, that's what I think that they've come to a decision. They have to do that. They have to they have to go all out and convince her that there are about 7,000 new registered voters in the city of Providence this year. You have to assume that many of them are probably under the age of 35. Many of them are like me, transplants that didn't grow up here.
But here's the thing. Do you think they'll rehash what everybody knows who's followed Buddy for the younger generation as a refresher course, remedial politics, or will they dig for something that most people don't know on the record and try to blow him out of this race?
I think the latter. I think they'll try. I think they know that people know in every headline or every story that gets written about Buddy Cianci, he is a 2-time convicted felon. He twice had to resign from City Hall. They're going to dig into both, I think, more personal issues, and I think, I wouldn't be surprised if you start to see them, bring up the assault case in the early 80s, really get into graphic details there. And then on the flip side, they're going to try to convince people that this is a guy who raised taxes whenever he had a chance. This is a guy who, put the city in a really tough fiscal situation.
I don't think any of that'll matter. I think the personal stuff is what, and now we've got to check to see, what overall good will come from the kind of weapons that they may use here. Sometimes this stuff boomerangs. Cianci will have enough money to be able to say, look what they're doing to me. That's going to be fascinating.
Well, he will absolutely have enough money and enough coverage in general. He'll get a lot of free media to be able to say, those East Side elitists are taking me on. And the question for Cianci is, can he convince the rest of the city that, by the way, voted for Michael Solomon, not Jorge Alorza, can he convince them that this is just as he said yesterday, a plot against him?
Give me 30 seconds on the teacher deal.
Yeah, so this is not a surprise. The teachers and the mayor have been fighting ever since the teachers endorsed Clay Pell for governor, and they're going back and forth. They're really caught up on one issue over performance pay in the third year of the contract. But the mayor says he wants to hold his ground. He thinks it's a fair contract, and he wants to move forward.
You think it'll resolve quickly?
Yeah, I think it'll probably, I would say before the end of the year. I think it will be resolved before the next mayor takes office.
So they'll work for a while without a deal.
There's a good chance, yeah.
Yeah, very good. I know you're not in the prediction business, but you got a prediction?
I can't do it. I leave it up to you. That's why I listen to you every day.
I'm not predicting anything either. When we come back, your state of mind. Thanks, Dan. I love hearing what you have to think via your state of mind. Phone us at 228-1886 or email us at stateofmind@myiritv.com or tweet or Facebook post. You get how to do that. Here's an interesting post or tweet or email. Patrick says, based on the facts, Ernie Almonte, who was on the program last night, was not afraid to adjust his course, meaning his move from Democrat to independent, I guess, in his run for treasurer. Combine that with some good town consistent campaign messaging across local media, and Ernie ought to wipe up the floor with Seth Magaziner, like Magaziner wiped up the floor with Caprio. I think easier written than done. You know, Ernie will have ample amount of dough to compete, and I still think that Ernie Almonte is the most qualified guy for a statewide race in this election season. But Seth Magaziner's got some star power and a Democratic group behind him, and so it'll be a very interesting fight to the finish there. Hopefully Mr. Magaziner comes to see us here. We can talk about that. We'll see you at noon tomorrow on the radio. We'll talk about the CNC numbers and take your calls. That will be the Alorza CNC numbers. See, even I do it. Bye.